Dear Chosen One, something has been watching you, not with eyes, but with intent. Something that knew how powerful the love between you and your twin flame could have been. Something that feared what you two might awaken together. And so, it didn't attack you with violence. It infiltrated the bond, subtly, slowly. It whispered to the insecurities, fed the ego, and twisted the soul of the one who once saw you as sacred. This isn't just about heartbreak. This is about spiritual war. And the most dangerous kind is the one that hides behind what once felt divine. You tried to hold on. You tried to love harder. But every time you reached for who they were, something colder stared back. Their heart changed. Their eyes dimmed. And their energy began to drain you. What you thought was your mirror became a maze, full of manipulation, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. But what if I told you it wasn't really them hurting you? What if something took over? What if the spirit behind their words was never meant to be in your story, but was sent to stop your story from unfolding? In this message, I'm going to walk with you through this mystery and reveal what really happened behind the scenes of your pain. You'll understand why it wasn't just a failed connection. It was a targeted spiritual hijack. And you'll finally remember the truth. Your light is the only thing that can break what was built to keep you small. If this already resonates with something deep in your spirit, write in the comments, "I see the truth now." And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss what heaven still wants to show you. It started like something sacred. You felt it instantly, the recognition, the pull, the echo of something ancient between you and them. It wasn't ordinary. It couldn't be. The energy was too intense, too specific, too familiar. It felt like home, like a soul you knew, long before you knew their face. And that's what made the shift so devastating. Because when something that divine begins to turn against you, it shakes more than your heart. It rattles your spirit. At first, it was subtle, a shift in tone, a distancing in presence, promises that no longer held weight. But deep within, your spirit began to speak, quietly at first. It told you something was wrong, that something wasn't them anymore, that the connection was being hijacked. But because you loved them, you stayed, you rationalized, you prayed harder, you tried to fight a spiritual war with emotional effort. But what you didn't know yet was that something had noticed your union, something ancient, something intelligent. And its strategy was not to destroy your flame, but to possess it. Not to break it from the outside, but to corrupt it from the inside. Because if it could twist what you trusted the most, it could paralyze your light. That's how the dark works. It mimics the divine, until you can't tell the difference. That spirit used their wounds. It fed off the unresolved pain, the craving for control, the fear of not being enough. And little by little, it replaced your twin flame's essence with performance, charm, and control. The mask of narcissism was not the root. It was the costume. And you, being sensitive, tried to speak to the soul behind the mask. But the more you reached, the more the mask tightened. You weren't speaking to them anymore. You were speaking to what had taken over. You began to doubt yourself, to question your worth, to wonder if you were imagining the spiritual pain. But that confusion wasn't your mind. It was part of the tactic. Narcissistic energy is not just psychological, it's energetic. It weaves webs of self-doubt, It distorts your intuition, and it makes you look like the unstable one. That's why you felt so tired. That's why your light dimmed. You weren't just heartbroken, you were spiritually drained. And that was the goal. Because when the enemy can't stop your purpose, it tries to confuse your perception. When it can't take your power, it attempts to seduce you into handing it over. One emotional collapse at a time. And what better way to do that than through someone you love? Someone you trusted? Someone you believed was your divine counterpart? But I need you to ask yourself something now. What if this wasn't about rejection at all? What if this was redirection from God, a mercy in disguise? What if the disconnect wasn't your fault, but your protection? What if heaven was trying to show you something you were still too in love to see? When the energy of narcissism takes over someone once connected to your soul, it doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds like a fog, creeping in quietly, dressing itself in charm, affection, or even spiritual language. They still speak the right words. They still mimic intimacy, but their spirit no longer matches their mouth. And that misalignment becomes unbearable to the sensitive heart. You feel something is off, not just emotionally, but vibrationally. And that's when the war begins. Not with them, but within you, between what you feel and what you're being shown. They start to control the narrative. Suddenly, your light becomes too much. Your depth becomes draining. You're too intense, too sensitive, too difficult. But they weren't saying that when they were feeding off your energy, when your presence was their healing. Now that you've activated something in them they can't control, they reject it. Not because it's wrong, but because it's exposing their shadow. And instead of healing with you, they let something else speak through them. Something that benefits from keeping you small, confused, and emotionally tethered. The cycle becomes toxic. Love bombing, withdrawal, silence, triangulation. Words that once felt like music now feel like weapons. And the worst part? A part of you still believes you can fix it. That if you just hold on a little longer, if you love them harder, they'll come back. But who are you waiting for? The person they were? Or the soul they buried? Because if a demon is speaking through them now, then your fight is no longer relational. It's spiritual. And spiritual battles require different armor. You begin to feel like a ghost in your own story. Still present, still trying, but unseen. They walk past you, talk over you, twist your truth. They perform empathy, but behind their eyes, there's no connection. It's like their soul stepped out and something else stepped in. And what hurts the most is remembering who they used to be. Because that memory becomes a hook. It keeps you invested in a version of them that no longer exists. That's the spell. Loving the illusion of who they were, while being slowly drained by who they've become. But let me tell you something raw and real, chosen one. Narcissistic energy doesn't attach to just anyone. It targets light. It targets those who carry depth, healing, and truth. Because when someone like you walks into a room, illusions shatter. And for someone who's protecting a false self, that's terrifying. Your light was never the problem. It was the threat. Your presence started a spiritual war inside them. And instead of surrendering to growth, they surrendered to ego. Or worse, to the entity feeding it. So here's the deeper truth. The enemy didn't send them to you. The enemy sent something into them once you got close. Because it recognized the power of your union. It knew that if you two rose together, something divine would be birthed through you. So instead of destroying it from the outside, it whispered lies into their pain, inflated their wounds, and turned them into a mirror you could no longer look into without bleeding. That wasn't love turning toxic. That was possession dressed as personality. And the longer you stayed, the more it drained you. Your energy, your clarity, your purpose. You stopped creating. You stopped hearing God clearly. You started questioning everything about yourself. Not because you were weak, but because you were being spiritually attacked through the one place your guard was down: intimacy. And now, the only way out is up. You don't fight demons in the same dimension where they play. You rise above them, and that's exactly what we're about to do. The turning point begins when you stop trying to convince them and start remembering who you are. Because the real loss wasn't them leaving. The real loss was how far you drifted from yourself while trying to pull them back. Somewhere in that journey, your voice got quieter. Your light got dimmer. Your truth got buried under emotional survival. But now your soul is waking up. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. And clarity is power. The kind of power no dark force can manipulate once it's activated. God starts to reveal things you weren't ready to see before. The hidden motives. The moments where your spirit hesitated, but you overrode it in the name of love. The manipulation, masked as vulnerability. The seduction of your compassion. It all starts to make sense now. Not so you live in regret, but so you rise in wisdom. This was never about punishment. It was about purification. The fire didn't come to destroy you. It came to burn the cords that were keeping you from flying. You realize now that you were never weak for loving them. You were powerful for seeing them, even when they were hiding from themselves. That's your gift. You see through people. You love beyond performance. And unfortunately, that gift also made you vulnerable to those who confuse love with control. But here's the shift. You don't have to keep bleeding to prove your love was real. Your healing is your proof, and your freedom is your protection. Something divine begins to happen when you stop reacting, when you no longer take their bait, when their silence no longer triggers your anxiety, when their praise no longer controls your peace. That's when the spirit behind the manipulation starts to panic, because it only survives in drama. It only feeds on your confusion. When you become still, detached, and clear, it starves. And that's when your light starts to win. You don't need to preach. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stand in your light, unmoved. Because light isn't loud. It's stable. It doesn't perform. It reveals. And when you remain in that frequency, truth does the work for you. It exposes what needs to be exposed. It crumbles what needs to fall. And it frees what wants to be saved, not what you want to save. And if that soul is still in there, under the ego, under the mask, under the spiritual fog, then maybe your elevation will inspire a return. But if it's not, then your light will reveal it. Either way, you win. Because your mission is not to rescue others from their demons, it's to make sure you don't hand yours your crown. This is not just about romance. It's about spiritual sovereignty, and it's time to take it back. So ask yourself this, deeply and honestly. Are you still fighting for the person they were? Or are you finally ready to rise into the person you are? Because one of you has been growing, and one of you has been running, and the gap is widening for a reason. not as a punishment, but as a divine invitation to choose yourself, not from ego, but from alignment. And alignment never betrays the soul. Here's the spiritual paradox. The more you elevate, the clearer everything becomes. Not just about them, but about you. You start to see how your need to fix them was rooted in an old wound. Maybe the wound of being unseen. Maybe the illusion that your love had to prove itself by saving others. But real love doesn't save. It reminds. And sometimes the reminder is silent. Sometimes it's in your absence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is not to fight for them, but to stand firm in who you are without them. When you rise like that, your entire frequency shifts. You stop chasing clarity and become clarity. You stop asking for closure and become the door that only opens to peace. You stop negotiating with energies that were never meant to stay. And that's when something miraculous happens. Your mind starts to rest again. Your nervous system calms. Your intuition sharpens. You begin to feel yourself again. And you realize just how far you had left your soul behind in that connection. That's what this battle was really about. Not about a broken love, but about a distracted light. And now that you're remembering, everything changes. You no longer crave what once drained you. You no longer tolerate the emotional crumbs they threw at you to keep you around. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You see clearly now, that wasn't divine love turning sour. That was a sacred illusion breaking so something more authentic could be born. And the truth is, not everyone is ready to rise with you. Some people prefer the illusion because it gives them control, because it protects their ego, because it allows them to avoid the deep inner work that your presence naturally demands. And so, they reject you. Not because you were wrong, but because your light brought truth too close. And that truth would have forced a death of the false self they weren't ready to release. But don't mourn the rejection. Bless it. Because it's showing you who has the capacity to walk where you're going. Not everyone does. And that's not your fault. It's simply the result of elevation. The higher you go, the thinner the air. And not everyone was built for high altitudes. Some are only meant to walk with you until the base of the mountain. The summit is a solo climb, until God sends those who can breathe where you're meant to soar. Now you understand why the disconnect happened. It wasn't failure. It was divine filtration. It was heaven stepping in where your heart was still entangled. It was spiritual intervention disguised as heartbreak. Because God saw what you couldn't. The spirit behind the mask. The manipulation behind the affection. The assignment behind the attraction. And when your mission began to suffer, God stepped in and let it fall apart to put you back together. This is your spiritual return. The moment where your energy reclaims its original position. Not under anyone's control. Not begging for validation, but centered, anchored, restored. And the most beautiful part? You don't need revenge. You don't need them to admit the truth. You don't need to be seen by those who chose blindness. Because now, you see, and that's enough. That's your freedom. You've entered the season of no longer chasing clarity, because you've become it. The fog has lifted, not because they finally spoke the truth, but because you finally stopped denying yours. You've reclaimed your energy, and now everything is falling back into alignment. Your creativity is coming back. Your inner voice is louder. Your connection with the divine is stronger. You're no longer begging the storm to calm down. You've remembered that you are the calm, the eye of peace in a world that tried to shake you. You're not who you were when you met them. You've evolved. You've grown through pain, through silence, through betrayal. You've had to become the closure you never received. And in doing so, you've stepped into a spiritual authority that no demon can mimic. Because now, your love is no longer desperate. It's discerning. Now, your light is not just radiant. It's refined. You're not just powerful. You're wise. And that wisdom makes you untouchable. And what if, just by standing in that light, you are already breaking what once held them? Not with force, not with words, but with purity. Because the kind of light you now carry doesn't just protect you, it shakes everything around you. It reveals what's been hiding. It triggers dormant souls to wake up. And sometimes, it burns those who refuse to leave the shadows. But that's not your burden to carry anymore. You're not responsible for how your presence exposes what others tried to conceal. This is the mystery of spiritual authority. When you rise in truth, things around you will either align or collapse. Souls will either elevate to meet you or exit to protect their illusions. But you must stay the course. You must not dim again. Because now you know what it costs to abandon yourself for the comfort of someone else's dysfunction. And that price is too high. You paid it once. You won't pay it again. There is no need to force a reckoning. The reckoning is already happening. In the silence, in the dreams, in the echoes of your absence. What they once rejected as too much is now the very presence they long for but cannot replicate. What they thought they could replace haunts them. Not because you are trying to haunt them, but because nothing artificial can fill the space that was once occupied by something real. You were never just a partner. You were an assignment of truth. So let the silence speak. Let the distance do what your words never could. Let the light you carry become the answer they refuse to receive. And if they ever wake up, truly wake up, they will know exactly where they lost you. Not in a moment, but in every denial of your worth, in every manipulation, in every lie that tried to reshape you into something lesser. And until then, you won't even need the apology, because your healing will be the only confirmation you ever needed. To all who have supported this message, this journey, and this channel, I want to thank you. Your generosity through Buy Me a Coffee means more than you can imagine. It allows us to continue creating deeply transformative content and speaking to the hearts that need it most. If you feel moved to support, the link is in the first pinned comment. May your kindness return to you in multiplied grace. And remember, you do not heal by proving your worth to those who have denied you. You heal by seeing yourself clearly enough that you never need their validation again. The moment you stop waiting for their recognition, you begin to recognize yourself. And that is when miracles begin. The world changes when you change. And now, your change is undeniable. You are no longer seeking rescue. You are the rescue. You are the light breaking every chain that has tried to place around your soul. If this message has ignited something within you, write in the comments, "I stand in the truth." Let that be your declaration. Let that be your stand. You have waited long enough. Now it is time for the world to feel what you have silently carried for so long. Like this video if it has reached you. Subscribe to the channel to receive more. of these sacred truths and hit the notification bell so you never miss when Spirit wants to speak again. This is not just a channeling. It is a movement of remembrance, a return to the original light. And you, dear soul, are part of it. Even if you stumbled here by accident, you were meant to find this. Or rather, it was meant to find you. Because your story does not end here. It begins on a new frequency, and from now on, you will walk not in search of love, but as love, not in fear of rejection, but in full acceptance of who you have become. If this message spoke to something deep within you, something you have struggled to name but have always felt, I invite you to watch the next video that appears on your screen right now. Or you can also explore the full playlist, a sacred space created for only the chosen. See you and God bless you.